Today, we're going to be talking about something that's maybe a little bit scary. I recently had my advanced lipid panel done. I'll be honest with you, Dr. Nelson, I'm slightly nervous. I was hesitant to start carnivore because I had congestive heart failure, an irregular heartbeat, still a ticking time bomb. I hear all of that. Like I'm gonna die. I need to stop carnivore.
The cholesterol, total cholesterol was high, but calling it pre-diabetes is like calling someone pre-pregnant. You're either pregnant or not, but the greatest risk would be type 2 diabetes, metabolic syndrome, number 2, hypertension. You have a bunch of other things that are not taken care of and they are not emphasized, and they should.
Have you ever had that little voice in the back of your head that says, I wonder what's really going on with my health? Maybe you've made some lifestyle changes, eating better, exercising more, but deep down, you still don't know if it's actually making a difference. I have been there. That's when I realized I needed more than just guesswork. I needed some answers. I needed some data. That's why I had my lipid panel, testosterone, A1C, and, as we're going to see in today's video, my advanced lipid panel, also known as a cardiac IQ test, done through today's sponsor, LabCorp On Demand. With LabCorp On Demand, you can choose and purchase tests online, then simply stop by a LabCorp patient service center for sample collection. No doctor's appointments needed. It's convenient and it gives you the kind of knowledge that helps you take real control of your health. In today's video with Dr. Nelson, I'm going to go over my advanced lipid panel that I had taken from LabCorp On Demand, and I'm going to share all of my numbers with you and what it means for you. I think it's very important that we look at the quality of our cholesterol, not just the quantity of it, and we can do that with an advanced lipid panel. Huge thank you to LabCorp On Demand for sponsoring today's video. Visit LabCorp On Demand with the link in the description below, also seen here on the screen, and use code HOMESTEAD to get 20% off select tests. Then, make an appointment or walk in one of LabCorp's 2,000 plus patient service centers for sample collection. Huge thank you to LabCorp On Demand for sponsoring today's video. Now let's get started.
Hello and welcome. I'm Kerry here from Healing Humanity, and today I'm thankful, grateful, blessed to welcome the amazing Dr. Nelson from Kiltz Health to the channel. Welcome, Dr. Nelson. How you doing?
Hello, I'm doing great.
Dr. Nelson, I appreciate you so much. I thank you for coming on here. Before we jump in, people are going to be asking, how can I find Dr. Nelson?
I work with Dr. Kiltz. I'm the director of health strategy at Kiltz Health. So drkiltz.com is a website, and my own channel is at The Real Dr. Nelson on YouTube.
I will have links in the description below for that. Today, we're going to be talking about something that's maybe a little bit scary. Maybe it doesn't need to be. I don't know. But I'll be honest with you, Dr. Nelson, I'm slightly nervous. I was hesitant to start carnivore because I had congestive heart failure, an irregular heartbeat. I was always fatigued, all sorts of issues with my heart. I was on a lot of medication. And so I keep getting these heart tests done, Dr. Nelson, and they're looking promising. But every time I do one, someone's like, oh, no, wait, you got to get this one done. You're still a ticking time bomb. I hear all of that. Well, long story short, I recently had my advanced lipid panel done. And Dr. Nelson, I started looking at it, and I don't know what I'm looking at. I have a rough idea what I'm supposed to look for. So could we maybe talk just briefly, what is the difference? Because all my life, I've had so many blood tests. It's always been a basic lipid panel.
So a basic lipid panel includes total cholesterol, includes triglycerides, includes LDL cholesterol, and includes HDL cholesterol, and then there'll be some calculation of the non-HDL cholesterol, and that's probably all it's going to give you. It will calculate out of those results some ratios like LDL to HDL ratio, total cholesterol to HDL ratio. You can do that with your own results. The one I'd like to look at first out of those will be triglyceride to HDL ratio. But yeah, that's a basic lipid panel.
Right. And it seems like a lot of people, probably myself included, especially when we do carnivore, will see those numbers on the basic lipid panel and just flip out. Like I'm gonna die. I need to stop carnivore. And I guess there's other things that we could be looking at and maybe should be looking at. And there's other factors. Like I know you emailed me some pretty interesting things too. I have that chart too. We could pull up and look at as well. But besides the basic lipid panel, I went and got my advanced lipid panel, which digs in deeper. I think from what I learned from Dr. Ovadia, the advanced lipid panel will kind of show you the quality of your cholesterol, where maybe the basic lipid panel is more just kind of the quantity. It's not as maybe indicative of having heart disease.
So the lipid panel measures, the basic lipid panel is going to measure the lipoproteins and cholesterol content. So it's a picture. The advanced lipid panel looks at the particle numbers of all the different lipoproteins, and it's a more direct measurement of the lipoproteins and not exactly the cholesterol, by the way. It's thought to be more accurate as well. And then it can divide the different lipoproteins, like the LDL or HDL or the intermediate density lipoprotein, IDL. It will count the particles of each of those. And amazing technology, it's the same nuclear medicine resonance. That's why it's called NMR. And basically it's measuring all the lipoprotein sizes as well. And they're smaller and bigger, smaller dense. LDL, for example, is thought to be more atherogenic than large and buoyant LDL. Okay, so that helps you determine the quality of the cholesterol, which is what Dr. Badia always refers to.
Should we just take a quick peek at the basic lipid panel and see
Sure.
if anything stood out?
So
maybe I'll pull my screen up too. I know this is kind of weird, but I've got everything in a project in ChatGPT. I know a lot of people are going to be rolling their eyes right now, but I have so much data. So it's kind of easy for me to share my screen this way.
So shall we take a look at, you sent me the LabCorp test results and the advanced lipid panel and the CIC score.
Right. We can look at, any of those. And I guess I have to be careful because I've had several tests done, basic lipid panels, which is really weird too, by the way, Dr. Nelson. I think I had one like 2 weeks apart and the numbers were drastically, maybe not drastically, but they were significantly different. But this is when I'm in ChatGPT now, I just pulled up, I said, what's my basic lipid panel? And said, here's one of the recent ones that it did. So it shows I don't know if we can, maybe I can make this a little bit bigger. Total cholesterol was 246, HDL 74, triglycerides 57, LDL 161, and non-HDL cholesterol was 172.
I have your August 1st lab results here.
Okay.
But I think I have some from May, I guess. So August. This looks like they collected August 1st. So this is the last one from what I see.
Okay.
And I see a total cholesterol of 272. So that is marked as high, and it is high. Now, when I graduated from medical school, that would probably not be considered high. I think at the time the top number was either 250 or 300 for total cholesterol. So they have continued to decrease the upper limit of normal. The triglycerides were 46, and that's a very good number. The HDL cholesterol was 71. That's also a very good number. The non-HDL cholesterol is 201, and the LDL-C was 195. Okay? However, you had about 3 months before some higher triglycerides, by the way. So these triglycerides are a lot better.
Right.
If we're only looking at I would say cover that Applebee for the moment. If we're only looking at the basic lipid panel, and that's we all have, the poor man's guide to, and as you mentioned, insulin resistance is triglycerides and HDL ratio. Okay? Because cholesterol numbers really don't change much from dietary cholesterol or saturated fat. It's not affected as much as what the blood sugar, the insulin resistance does. So they are affected by insulin resistance, glucose levels, more than by dietary sources. I think, do you have some thyroid tests here?
I'm not sure. Let me see.
Okay. So the comment regarding that is this. I never treat when I was more into treating cholesterol numbers, I would not treat cholesterol numbers unless the thyroid was normal, because thyroid always affects the cholesterol numbers. And cholesterol numbers are almost like blood sugar. They change from day to day. There might not be giant, huge changes, but in particular, the triglycerides can be very high and very low from one day almost to the other.
That really surprised me, because I don't know how this worked out, but I had about 3 basic lipid panels done just over the course of a couple of months. And I'm like, I just eat carnivore, and I fasted the same way before each of them. And it was like you just said, I believe it was the triglycerides were kind of significantly different between each, which I guess is just a good note for people, because I think a lot of people get their basic lipid panel done and they make like lifelong decisions. Like, I'm going to change everything based on this. They could go get
this
that
one
done
test that day. And sometimes they don't even, as far as fasting, you should probably fast 12 to 16 hours. Not much longer, probably not much shorter. The main number that gets affected is the triglycerides, by the way, in that regard. But, all right, so going back to the numbers, yes, your total cholesterol was high, but triglycerides were 46, lower than your HDL, which means your triglyceride to HDL ratio is less than 1, right?
Right.
The non-HDL cholesterol is something most doctors will not direct treatment to. However, the HDL is it's supposed to be the protective one. And if you take the HDL out of the equation, the rest are thought to be atherogenic molecules. And remember, we're measuring the lipoproteins that carry cholesterol in this particular test. We're not measuring the particle numbers or the size of the particles either. All right. And just as you also have some other tests here. All your CBC and comprehensive metabolic panel, urine analysis, all that was good.
Yeah. The only other thing that really stood out that I was kind of happy about was my testosterone. I think it said 613. And I hadn't realized I had it tested earlier, but the last time I had it tested was about 15 years ago, and it was around 300.
and that's pretty good. You're right smack in the middle of you're at the mean, uh, statistically speaking. Testosterone can also vary a little bit. Doesn't vary as much, and so that's a good number to have. I think mine was around that. Funny that I had gone to Hack Your Health last year, and I had done just a few weeks before, or maybe a couple of months, at the testosterone level, and someone who was there selling a testosterone supplement was doing a free test, and it seems everybody was coming low. I don't know. My test by the lab had said it. I was near 600, so I didn't buy the supplement.
Right. And my A1C was 5.2, which I believe that was maybe one of the first times I've ever had that tested, surprisingly. Or maybe I did many years ago, but I never did recently other than that one.
So that's a very good number. We consider when we go above 5.6 pre-diabetes, and when it goes beyond 6.5, we call it diabetes. It's just a gradient on the same scale. I think we need to name it something different, because I think once you go beyond 5.7, I have seen complications of diabetes when the patient was never or has never been diagnosed with diabetes, because they start happening as soon as you go from 5.6 to 5.7. Complications, like major complications, all-cause mortality goes up, cancer incidence goes up. Cancer, a lot of it's caused, or you have a higher risk by having diabetes or pre-diabetes, and cardiovascular events go up, not at 6.5, but at 5.6 to 5.7. So my issue with that, I don't know if I am alone in this, but calling it pre-diabetes is like calling someone pre-pregnant. You're either pregnant or not. You either have diabetes or not. Could be at an early stage, but you already have the metabolic dysfunction,
right,
that you could call diabetes. Anyways, so 5.2 is excellent. Even when studies show that it's very important when you go beyond 5.6, you start having more complications, and the line is flat up until you get around that number. But there are many people who believe that your A1C, to be sure that that you don't have any insulin resistance or insulin insensitivity. Some people have a problem with the insulin resistance name, but you should be no more than 5.2, perhaps. Some people think 5.3, 5.4, 5.5, 5.6. You're already having some insulin resistance before that number crosses the 5.6, which takes us to one of the other tests that you had here. I don't know, some of these calculated numbers are proprietary algorithms that the lab that's doing it has. And they did a diabetes risk index on you, which is a totally calculated number based on the cholesterol changes, and they put you at a high risk of diabetes. Don't know. With a 5.2 hemoglobin, your triglycerides being normal, I would have to dig more into how they calculate. Some of these formulas are proprietary, and they don't share them, by the way.
Yeah, I was scratching my head at that one, especially looking at the other numbers. It seemed like it was something unique to to them. But just real quick, I don't know if we want to talk about this now, but when we're looking at the A1C, is it fair to say that that is something people should probably maybe be more concerned about versus just the basic lipid panel numbers?
Yes, because like I said, diabetes, any metabolic dysfunction that includes glucose levels, insulin resistance, insulin sensitivity, affects the cholesterol numbers, right? And we know this to the point that the big labs have come up with ways of determining your insulin resistance levels based on the cholesterol numbers without even using insulin, by the way, in the calculation, or using glucose in the calculation. So a couple of things. You could be for 20 years having normal fasting blood sugars, having a normal A1C, and still based on your pattern of eating, your fasting insulin, your insulin levels could be high because your body is taking care of business, right? So you eat a lot of carbohydrates, you secrete a lot of insulin to bring that down, and you enter sort of a vicious cycle with the diet where you're putting more carbohydrates into the system, your body is secreting more insulin, and at some point your body starts to ignore the high levels of insulin. So at that point, you're starting to break the system a little bit, but still you could go several years, maybe at that point, not more than 5 to 10 years, but you're going to end up having very likely diabetes, prediabetes, metabolic syndrome, PCOS, and there's 30, 40 or more conditions that are a result of hyperinsulinemia. So the A1C, which gives you the last 3 months, is an average of the last 3 months. It's a good test to have, but it doesn't tell you anything beyond the 3 months, by the way. It just tells you what has happened in the past 3 months, your average blood sugar, and that's it. Do you do a fasting insulin with this?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. All right.
Just,
you were going to ask.
I was going to say that really amazing chart you sent me an email. I have access to that now. If you want to talk about that or show it on the screen, just let me know. I can click it on.
All right.
Should we take a look at her now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Here we go.
So this is an article that Professor Timothy David Oakes, and you can put the link in the description to the full study. I recommend everybody reads it, but it is a scientific paper. It's a reevaluation of the women's health study. It's a big study, lasted more than 20 years with thousands and thousands of, I think the number was, you see it there, 28,000 women. That's a large study. Still epidemiological studies, and we do know that they have some downsides to it. They don't give you causation, but you can determine whether something is associated with something else. In this case, whether one of these 12 things here was associated with the development of coronary heart disease specifically. And when we look at that table, the big red number that's the largest there, it's almost 11, is type 2 diabetes. All right. So what is the biggest risk for the development of coronary heart disease? It is type 2 diabetes. Now, a lot of people concentrate on the bad cholesterol, right? The LDL-C cholesterol. And if you take a look at that table and you go quickly to the very bottom, number 11 out of those 12 is LDL-C cholesterol with a hazard ratio of 1.38. So 1 being the general population, 1.38 means a 38% greater risk of having a heart attack or coronary heart disease than the general population, whereas having type 2 diabetes is almost 1100% when compared to the general population, because that's what that almost 11 there means. I mean, if you want to be exact, it's 10.71. So this is what is called a very strong signal that if you're going to worry about LDL cholesterol, and I'm not saying it's not a risk, it's not absolute risk. We're gonna review the particle numbers, but the greatest risk would be type 2 diabetes, metabolic syndrome, number 2, hypertension, obesity, smoking, even family history is under 2, by the way. And 2 is generally considered numbers that are, even though they might be statistically significant, is not a strong signal for coronary heart disease, right? But you can see on the blue lines are all tests. Insulin resistance is almost 7, right? Same point, 6.40. Triglycerides are over 2, it's 2.14. So if you had only the basic lipid panel to go on, what's more important as a risk for coronary heart disease? Well, triglycerides are a higher risk than the LDL or bad cholesterol. Apolipoprotein is 1.89, non-HDL cholesterol 1.67. Almost everything you can measure is a higher risk than the LDL-C. And inflammatory biomarkers came at number 12. And we do look at those, usually high sensitivity C-reactive protein, but that has a lesser risk for coronary heart disease than many of the other things. It did come at the bottom.
That's amazing. It really is incredible. I mean, like you said, we're not saying you don't have to worry about LDL, but so what is there? 11 other things that could be considerations that almost nobody even considers. It's like everyone I talk to, they're just LDL. And
there's they go straight to the number 11 there, and you have a bunch of other things that are not taken care of, and they are not emphasized, and they should. Nowadays, diabetes nowadays is pandemic levels, and I know I'm not exaggerating. It might seem so. We have pandemic levels. More people die of diabetes and diabetes complications than almost anything. Okay, because cancer, strokes, heart attacks could be complications of diabetes. Most people don't die of the diabetes per se. Diabetes is basically elevated blood sugars. There are some criteria about the number and the many hours that the high blood sugars may last. But at the end of the day is not what people usually die from. They die from the complications of diabetes, which are multiple, very well known. So we're not going to go over that. But so in your case, you didn't give me if you had any old blood tests from when you were 100 pounds more than now. But if I had to take a guess, well, I can tell you, you probably had metabolic syndrome because you did take blood pressure medication.
Yep.
Were you pre-diabetic, diagnosed pre-diabetic at some point? Yeah, you don't remember?
If I had to bet, I'd say I was, but I don't recall them ever saying that to me. I don't know how I couldn't have been.
So we're guessing, but uh, triglycerides were probably high. HDL was low.
Fatty liver.
You had a mini stroke. You have fatty liver. You have all the elements basically to say that you have metabolic syndrome, which you don't now. Okay, so if you remember the graphic we were seeing, metabolic syndrome, I believe, was the second one there.
Yep,
Right.
second one.
So, and then you also you were taking blood pressure medication.
Yep.
Okay. You were obese.
Yep.
Okay. So these are things that need to be taken into consideration. I'm not advocating that you ignore your cholesterol numbers, but when you put it in perspective, these are the things that you need to modify the most to decrease your risk the most. Because if you have diabetes, I have or had diabetes, that's my biggest risk of having and this particular study was measuring coronary heart disease, but it's the same process in the brain. Strokes and heart attacks are basically the same process. One is in the heart, one is in the brain. In the brain, you can also have hemorrhagic strokes, which are a little bit of a difference, but all those other factors are more important to modify. I'm not saying the LDL cholesterol may not be important. Even in our community, I was talking to a cardiologist who is he's low carb. As a matter of fact, it was a low carb USA San Diego just a few weeks ago, last month. And he still believes that the cholesterol is important, but he also believes, like Dr. Vadia and perhaps like me, that we need to look at the particle numbers and at the circumstances. Okay, everything has to be put into context. If your LDL is high, but also your triglycerides are high, your HDL is low, you have insulin resistance, or you have prediabetes hypertension, which also is from insulin resistance, you have diabetes, you have the perfect storm to have a heart attack or a stroke. Okay? So if you eliminate all of them, great. If you're able to eliminate most of them and there's one thing left, which does not seem to be the main determinant, make your own conclusions.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing in retrospect that's crazy to me is when I had all those issues and I was 100 pounds heavier and I was sick, the only talk was really like, let's put you on a statin, let's put you on medication. And I had all of those other 10 or so things that I could have been addressing that I feel like were the actual root cause of potentially getting heart disease in the first place, inflammation, insulin resistance, those things. We never talked about those. We talk about statins and then, we don't have to talk about statins now because we could go off on a whole other conversation, but you've talked about it before. And Dr. David Diamond, I just listened to his presentation on it. And the fact that 1 out of 100 people, and those are the good numbers. He actually had worse numbers for a particular brand of statins, but 1 out of 100 people see a benefit. 99 out of 100 don't. We're just talking about statins now, and then there's 10 other things that we could be focusing on that seems in most cases to just nobody talks about them. It's just like go in there and throw them on a statin because of their cholesterol. It just seems so backwards.
So if your doctor tells you, oh, I got to put you on a statin, what are they trying to do? They are trying to, even if they're not explaining it to you this way, they are trying to decrease your risk of what? Of atherosclerosis. Or they are trying to reverse atherosclerosis. And that's why they are offering you the statin. But if they are offering you the statin along with ignoring if you have any of the other 10 things that have a higher hazard ratio for coronary heart disease, then that is probably a disservice. That's my opinion, because you have a medication that has been marketed as this great thing. In the case of the one in particular, I'm not going to even mention the name. It's not worth it. But the numbers of all of them are very similar, by the way. So if you have over 3.5 years, I think the study lasted, thousands of people, and those without medication had a 3% incidence of heart attacks over the 3 years. I don't think it was per year, over the 3 years, 3.5 years. And with the medication, it was down to 1.9%, right? That means 1.1% difference between the placebo group and the medication group. Now, that's not how they sold it to me when they came to the office 30 years ago trying to convince me to write for this prescription. They sold it to me as having a 36% relative risk reduction in heart attacks. Okay? Where did that number come from? It wasn't magic. It was just a manipulation of statistics.
Yeah.
It is a real number, by the way. If you don't believe me, just divide 1.1 by 3.
Yeah.
That's where the number comes from.
Right.
But they never told me the absolute risk reduction was really 1%. If you take 100 men with medication, 100 men without the medication, 3% and 1.9%, if we're talking about just 100, it's probably 2, because but the percentage was 1.9. So, yeah, there'll be a difference of heart attacks in the two groups of just one person, not 36.
Yeah.
1.
It's like false advertising. I don't know. It's criminal. It's so misleading, because I remember seeing commercials.
But may I remind you that it is a real number.
Yes, it is.
It's a manipulation of statistics. Mark Twain, at least it's credited to him that he said there are lies, damn lies, and statistics.
Yeah. When we interviewed Rancher Maggie, she quoted that as well. But I was just going to say, I remember seeing commercials, and I did a video on this a while ago, so I did some more research, but they used to put that in the commercials too. 36% risk reduction. And I would hear that and be like, oh, the odds of me getting a heart attack are going down by 36%. I should probably take a statin. Had they told me 1 in 100 see a benefit, 99 out of 100 see zero benefit, plus there could be side effects, I would be thinking a lot differently about that. So it's just crazy they do that.
You mentioned the side effects. I'll mention just one of them. There are multiple side effects. There's a long list of things that can happen with statins, but one of them is there is an absolute risk increase. This is also a statistical number, but it's an absolute risk increase of developing diabetes or worsening your insulin resistance with all the statins, and they have different numbers, but that number, so you have a decreased risk of 1.1%, while your absolute risk increase for diabetes is more than 1.5%.
So we go back to this chart, which type 2 diabetes on the top of the thing that you want the least, you increase the risks of getting by taking statins. I don't know, Dr. Nelson, the whole statin things is just blowing my mind. And I know Dr. David Diamond was talking about this. There's some studies that show increased odds of dementia, but it's one of those things where it's like, how do we know when literally we put every single person on a statin? Would they have had dementia anyways? Are they having it worse? Do they just think, well, this is just old age, but it's really the statins? And then just the fact they're like, they're just pushing them so hard. I remember I interviewed Dr. Chafee, and he's like, is there going to be a point where we're giving these to just children? Like a baby's born, let's put them on a statin. Like, when does it stop? And all for 1 out of 100.
The other factor that's very interesting here is they do reduce cholesterol. I can say, yes, taking a statin will reduce the cholesterol. Will that reduction of cholesterol avoid you having a heart attack? Okay, and the evidence is the 1%, right? However, I think the statins work maybe in a different way, because many of the molecules we're going to discuss later also have an effect on coagulation. And there's a theory out there that the plaque formation is the remnant of clots. Okay. And for example, the LP little a that we're going to talk about is just an LDL particle with a little tail of something that interferes with clot lysis, with breaking down the clots. So it is thought to increase your atherogenicity. One of the things it's doing is interfering with that clot resorption. So, and there are multiple other molecules involved in this that have to do with clot formation. So there are some people that believe that that might be a more important thing to look into. It is not the most popular. It has been around for a while, but it's not the most popular theory. But if you want a good book on that, The Clot Thickens by Dr. Malcolm Kendrick. He also wrote The Cholesterol Con. So he's a self-professed cholesterol skeptic. And so it's a perspective to have when you're taking all these things into consideration. I think the statins might work because they have a weak anticoagulant effect.
Interesting. All right. Well, should we take a look at the advanced lipid panel? And
all right.
Are there other names for this, Dr. Nelson? And
NMR lipoprotein test is one of them. Most labs will know, but you can call it advanced lipid panel, or a lipoprotein fractionation is another term that's used. And it's basically the technology used is NMR, nuclear medicine resonance.
Is this something that is ordered regularly by doctors, or do you really have to kind of ask for it or fight for it? Or
most primary care doctors or other primary care providers, nurse practitioners, physician assistants, most of the time they won't order this. They know it exists. I'm pretty sure they most know, but they probably will not do this on a routine basis. And it's not that expensive. And even if you ask, they might tell you, no, your insurance is not going to cover it. Or even if they don't say it, they might say it's not needed, because in the back of their mind is, I don't know what to do with it.
Right. Well, this was a thing I wish I would have had before I went on the 8-year-long journey of taking statins. Maybe that wouldn't have changed it, but then the CAC was another one. But I didn't realize these were tests that were even available. But yeah, if we want to take a look at it, let's see. So this is my advanced lipid panel. I can pull up some screenshots too if we want. Let's see if this will fit on here. Here's one. It's loading up here. Here we go. Well, it doesn't all fit on one page, but most of it's on there right now. Except my lipoprotein A is on another screen.
It's all right. We can talk about the first thing there that says pattern.
Okay.
That's a good pattern. That's an A pattern, not a B pattern. It's the good proportions. So without even looking at the rest, I'm not saying that the rest is not important, but without looking at the rest, that's a good thing. All right. And trying to look to see what page that is. Okay. It's one of the last pages. Okay. So now what we have there, though, is the total particle count, right? Or a fractionation, the LDL peak size, that's large LDL particles. And then we have the ApoB. Now, I saw two, you repeated the ApoB in August, and these tests are from May. So it was 121, and in August was 142, very similar number. So apolipoprotein B, whether it's a VLDL, an LDL, an IDL, they all have one molecule of ApoB attached to it. So rather on depending on only the LDLC, if you measure the ApoB, it's supposed to give you a more accurate risk factor. The higher the number, the more risk that you have a heart attack. But let's take this into context. The context being that other chart where we had the ApoB or the apolipoprotein didn't say A or B or anything like that, but it was ApoB. I think it was 1.69 compared to everything else that was higher, including triglycerides. Triglycerides had a hazard ratio over 2 in that graph, remember?
Right.
All right. So LP liter A is 28. That is very good. LP liter A, some people recommend you only do it once in your lifetime because it's always going to be either high or low. There's not the medications that are available to decrease or increase LP liter A are not exactly the greatest in terms of effectiveness, and it's thought to be genetically predisposed. So your number is going to be either low or high. You want to do a comparison? My LP liter A is 175. Okay, so that number is good. Genetically, that LP liter A might be one of the most important factors in helping you assign risk. All right, so among the many things we can look at, which include the hemoglobin A1C, includes the insulin resistance, includes your glucose numbers in general, includes the triglycerides, HDL, includes weight, visceral fat, waist circumference, blood pressure, whether you smoke or not, whether you have family history or not. So the LP liter A in your case is a great number. Okay. And so the pages following that, your glucose was 84, your A1C was 5.1. All right. So the pages before that, though, you had a total cholesterol of 245. You had, I'm going to have to use my readers. You had 245 and your previous number was 240. That's almost identical. Triglycerides on that occasion were 139. Now, I suspect that because you've been carnivore for a couple of years, I don't know, did you fast more than 12 hours?
I did for this, yeah.
Okay. So but a more recent one, your triglycerides were much lower. So your cholesterol to HDL ratio, it's a number I used to look at before. Anything under 3.5 is good. Even lower than that, 2.5 is great. But when I look at these numbers from the basic, the basic things we have on the lipid panel, the total cholesterol is not as important as that HDL and the triglycerides. If you look at the triglycerides on that other graph, it's over 2. So carries a higher risk when you have a higher triglyceride than ApoB and an LDLC, right?
Right.
So non-HDL cholesterol is 181. Prior to that had been 174. That's a very similar number. Okay. So HDL particles. Anything over 60 is considered a negative risk factor, meaning if your HDL for men is under 40, that's a risk factor, a positive risk factor for coronary heart disease. If it's over 40, that's a normal. But if it's over 60 for a man, that is great. That takes away one of the, when you calculate 10-year risk, that would take away. And the HDL size, they're all large. Well, the particle, there are 7,521 of them are large. On the LDL particles, so the LDL was 147 here. Your August labs did show LDL 190. That's the one that would throw most primary care doctors into a panic, right?
Right.
You have two numbers. You have 147, and then on 529 you had 155. All right. So LDL particle number, an LDL, IDL, VLDL, they are all considered atherogenic particles. So the higher the number, the more risk there may be. But rather than looking just at the total particle number, which is that LDL particle number is the total particle number, the LDL small, that was 451, which is higher than what we want. So here, these are small, dense LDL. Now, we don't have numbers from before. So we don't know what they were before. Looking at everything else and knowing some of the history, I would say it was probably much higher, and this is a lower number, but we have no idea where it came from. The LDL medium size, 539, that's also high. And am I missing a page? Okay, so this will be the next page. But the LDL pattern, by the way, is an A pattern, which is the good one. The apolipoprotein B, I think I already said it, but it's basically an extra molecule. It's an apolipoprotein B100 attached to all the atherogenic part. The ones that are considered atherogenic, it's everything but the HDL, and there's only one per lipoprotein. So counting the apolipoprotein gives you sort of an absolute number and increases your risk of heart attacks and strokes. But when you take everything into the context and you look at the hazard ratio for apolipoprotein, that was 1.69, I believe. So when you put everything together, yes, your total cholesterol is high. Yes, your LDL cholesterol is high, but the LP little a is normal. Your apolipoprotein B is higher than you would like. It should be under 90, but we don't know where you were coming from. So, in your present state with normal blood pressure, normal blood sugars, uh, I don't see any signs of insulin resistance that I can speak of, even though that number, that calculated number, was a little bit high. When you take everything into context, yes, you have one of the many things a little bit higher. Now, what is that risk for? Before you have a heart attack, most people develop what is called atherosclerosis. The plaques that form in this case specifically in the coronary artery, they form everywhere. By the way, they don't form everywhere evenly. They form mostly in areas of turbulence where this is why blood pressure is a factor, because they usually form in areas of turbulence, which speaks up in favor of that less well-known theory of the clot formation. Okay, there's arterial damage because of blood pressure, and there's repair going on, and that's where they form. But when you take the whole thing into account, now what we need to know to determine more accurately your risk would be, do you have atherosclerosis? So the best test to do that, entry level best test, there are multiple tests, but simplest, cheapest would be a coronary artery calcium score, CAC score, which you did. And I think you already revealed what it was, right?
Big zero. Yeah, I was so happy. But like
So,
that too, Dr. Nelson, that was another one where I never did it before. Obviously, zero is great, but I was almost wondering if my worry was it was going to come back high, and then everyone would be like, "See, that's from carnivore," and it's like, no, that could have been from the 43 years before leading up to that. I have heard of several people. I had a guy on my channel that had 3 CAC scans done on carnivore, and they all went down. It was like 160 and then down to zero by his third one. I don't know how
so
common that is, but
atherosclerosis, like diabetes, doesn't happen overnight. Okay, it, you know, heart disease is number one killer of humanity. By the way, cancer is number two. Accidents actually is number three. Those accidents may include medication adverse effects, doctor doing the wrong things, and all that. But heart disease, cancer, accidents in general. So what we try to do with a patient when we see them in the office is not fill their bag of medication, is actually reduce the risk of dying. And even though we're all going to die, but at least if I decrease your risk of having something, I'm pretty sure I'm improving at least your quality of life. So when your doctor says, "Oh, we got to put you on a statin because you're going to have a heart attack tomorrow," exaggerating, but let's determine whether you have atherosclerosis. And you did the test, is zero. But I want you to concentrate on the second, item number 2, on the conclusions, right? A calcium score of 0 gives a patient a very low risk of a heart attack. The risk is less than 0.1% per year. Okay, 1% is 1 in 100, 0.1% is 1 in 1,000. Okay, I cannot guarantee you risk of 0 from anything, because we finish here today and I could have a heart attack. I could have a car accident. I can have so many other things that happen tomorrow, and I have no idea the life expectancy. But your chances of having a heart attack over the next 10 years, if you add zero 0.1 10 times, that's 1% over the next 10 years. You probably don't need to repeat your CAC score next year, although for scientific curiosity might be a thing to do. You having a channel, maybe you should repeat it, ideally at the same place, because the interpretation of this is like the interpretation of any other imaging. Depends on the equipment a lot, depends on the technician, and depends on the doctor interpreting the results. So if you try to have the same circumstances, at least same place next year, you can compare. Should be 0, but could it increase? Yeah, it could increase. But yeah, this is a very good result. You have very little chance of dropping dead from a heart attack. You could die from one of your goats hitting you
right
when you're out.
Probably more likely at this point, but yeah. Well, the thing that really surprised me with all this, Dr. Nelson, was I had no idea how inexpensive and accessible a CAC scan was. I've heard many people talk about it, and in my brain, I thought this is going to be like $10,000 or something, or I'm going to need
do you pay?
$50 out of pocket, no insurance. I literally Googled CAC scan near me, and as you know, I live out in the middle of nowhere. I had to drive. It was about an hour away, but no doctor's orders.
I've been there. It's the middle of nowhere.
Yeah. It was $50 out of pocket. I was really upset because I'm like, I took those statins for 8 years and I had brain fog, memory loss. I don't know if it was from the statins or all the other drugs, but those are some of the common side effects. But I didn't want to take those. And maybe if I would have had the CAC scan done then, maybe I would have had a higher score. I don't know. But if it would have been 0, I would have said no to those. So I keep encouraging people, since I've done that test. If I'm not telling anybody what to do, but if it were me and I went to my doctor and they did a basic lipid panel and they said, you go on these statins, I would say, let me go get a $50 CAC scan first. And then
you can ask your doctor. They might order it. It might be covered by your insurance. That depends on the insurance and the willingness of the doctors.
Right.
On what to do. Very often, unfortunately, the doctor that's not used to dealing with something, they might not know what to do, because they might just, okay, let's send you to the cardiologist.
Right.
But if you have high cholesterol, it's indicated to send you, and insurance should pay. But even if it doesn't pay, you pay $50. You know how much I paid a year and a half? I think about 15 months ago, I think it was. It was free.
Nice.
Yeah, there's a place in Orlando that does it for free. Of course, they're trying to upsell you a bunch of other stuff.
Right.
That's why they do it. They get you in the door. But listen, it was free. My wife had it. I had it.
If someone is thinking about the advanced lipid panel, I have one follow-up question. On the advanced lipid panel, my particles were A. Is it just A and B? And is B like the small, dangerous, dense ones?
The A pattern is the more dangerous. The one that carries more risk, yes.
Okay. Which one did I have again? So I had the one that's more dangerous, the A?
No, the B is more dangerous. Sorry, if I said A, the B is more dangerous.
B is more dangerous. So it's just A and B. It's like big or small, right? Okay. And if it was B, what would you recommend? Would it be like, well, maybe go get a CAC before you make any decisions?
Well, then you need to talk to your doctor and talk about the different options that you have. Number one option in the doctor's bag will be, oh, let's put you on a statin, right? I would, as a patient, I would like to know what my CAC score is. a follow-up test. If you see CSA scores anything else but 0, then you might want to do one of two tests or both. A carotid intima media thickness test, which is an ultrasound, but it requires a skilled sonographer who knows what they're doing, and they need to be certified by, I think the company is Clearly does a CTA angiogram with artificial intelligence overread. Anyways, they're both more than just a regular ultrasound or a CTA or CT angiogram, because they use artificial intelligence, the CTA, for overreading it, and the CIMT is basically to see if you have atherosclerosis. I had one in San Diego, didn't have an official report, but I already knew I had atherosclerosis. I had a stroke,
Right.
So I already knew I had that. I already knew my CAC score was 165. My cardiologist said, just keep your LDL under 70, and he was happy with that. For other reasons, I had stress tests. I've always passed my stress tests. I would have liked to have a CTA angiogram done and get more information. They are more expensive. So out of these three things I have mentioned, the CAC score, the CIMT, and the CTA with artificial intelligence is the most expensive one.
Okay. Just one other question. So this was about after I had my stroke, I went in and had a heart catheter done. Is that an angiogram? Is that something else?
An angiogram is another name for a cardiac cath.
I was talking to Jen and I'm like, can you find those records? Because would that show anything else that I could compare now? It doesn't show anything. Would it show any blockage or anything that I could compare to a CAC?
Probably wouldn't. If I had to guess based on the information we have, you probably didn't. I'll tell you what you had. In my experience and having limited information, but knowing a little bit about your history, you do have, or I'm asking because I thought you mentioned this, you had a patent foramen ovale.
Yeah.
You have a hole in your heart.
Yeah.
That increases your risk of having emboli, little clots form and they go to your brain. And that was most likely what happened with you.
Right.
We know from current tests that you don't have any signs of atherosclerosis. So a stroke, whether ischemic, which means there is a blockage. Now, in your case, this little hole in your heart increases your risk of developing blood clots. And if you had a little bit of arrhythmia, with which you did, was an atrial fibrillation, I believe, but any arrhythmia then can have the right environment for blood clots developing in the heart, and having that little hole increase your risk. So if I had to guess, put some money on a bet, most likely that was what happened with you. You develop a little clot, it went to your brain, caused the TIA, mini stroke, full stroke. You know my opinion on that. We've talked about it, but was probably the cause. At the time, your metabolic health was also not the best. And when there's more sugar, more triglycerides, your blood is more likely to develop clots.
Sure.
Okay. So, I mean, I'm guessing, I have no idea whether that was the case, but in my experience, the most likely scenario.
That makes sense. Well, I really appreciate everything, Dr. Nelson. I think maybe a good way to end this is I really appreciate this chart you sent. we're not giving medical advice, but if I was worried about one thing, I would be looking at these things. Someone asked me, they said, Dr. Nelson, they said, Carrie, what if your CAC scan came back and it was 200 or something like that? What would you do differently? And I'm not telling anybody what to do. I'm only speaking for myself. But what I would do is I would focus on all of these things on this chart and see, is there anything else I can fix or address the root cause of? I think I'm pretty much doing that as best I can on Carnivore, but maybe there's some things on there I could be. And I feel like I just keep healing on Carnivore the longer I go. So maybe I'm not fully healed, but that's what
there
I
are
would
other
do.
things. There are other things that can be used, not just as statins. They all come with drawbacks and possible side effects, but something as simple as niacin. The problem with niacin is you have to take it in high doses. It increases your risk of diabetes much more than statins do. It can cause liver damage at high doses. It can have an uncomfortable flushing effect. And in studies, even though it decreases triglycerides and cholesterol, very good. It's very good to increase your HDL, decrease your triglycerides. But in the studies that are available, they do not decrease the heart attacks and the mortality. So so we have to be very careful when someone's talking, oh, this drug lowers your cholesterol. But lowering cholesterol doesn't always equate to not having a heart attack or not having a stroke or not dying, or all-cause mortality and the events. If they're not changed, then what is it worth to lower your cholesterol? And we've known this for a long time. Let me give you an example because I like to mention this one. The Minnesota Coronary Experiment. Look it up. It was done from, I believe, 1968 to 1973, at the time when we had insane asylums everywhere. Well, I don't know if everywhere, but they were more common. 60s, right? So they did an experiment. Do you know who the principal investigator was? His name was Ansel Keys.
Oh.
This study was not published until 2015, from 1973, that had been finished because they put in a drawer. Ansel Keys took his name off the Minnesota Coronary Experiment, even though he was the principal investigator. Why? This is what the study did. They took this is a big cohort, thousands of people. They had a choice of using corn oil or continuing using the animal fats that we're using, the butter or the lard or the tallow, whatever they were being fed. But this particular group, the intervention group, was corn oil. Well, guess what? Corn oil decreased cholesterol. Great. The corn oil group also had more strokes. So lowering cholesterol didn't decrease the chances. Lowering cholesterol and using the corn oil and whatever you want to blame it on, that group had more strokes than the ones that continue to use animal fats. So what happened? It was put in a drawer, never to be spoke of again, and discovered just a few years ago. And Ansel Keys officially took his name off anything that had to do with that experiment.
Wow. That doesn't sound like Ansel Keys. Cherry picking. Man.
And unfortunately, that's what happens with many studies. If they do not conform to what the people doing the experiment wanted, there is a high chance that it was never published. Right. There's no law against it. Seems dubious, right?
Yeah.
but there's no law against it. If I didn't like the result, if I'm paying for the study and I didn't like the result, then I own that study. I don't publish it. And so imagine this is not an isolated case. Imagine how many times we've had studies probably paid by, I don't know, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, whoever, sugar base of fat versus fat, and we've never seen the result because they are not pretty.
Yeah. I was just thinking, how many statin studies have they buried till they get to the one, and then the one they get to is 1%, but they're like, oh, we could just game the number and they'll never figure it out.
Well, I cannot tell you all the details because I do not know the specific details and how long, but one of these newer medications for cholesterol, which are very potent, they stopped the study early because they started to see a signal of some negative results. And they stopped it because they were so successful at lowering cholesterol. The signal didn't translate into the statistics as being something statistically significant. I don't know. Those are the manipulations sometimes that happen. Yeah. I'm not going to mention names because I don't know for sure, but
we get through all of this, and I just think of Dr. Kiltz and just eat fatty meat. Eat fatty meat. That's all you got. That's what it comes down to. Like all these tests too. It's always kind of what it gets back to me. Just return to what's natural. Yeah.
And he we're both traditionally trained doctors, and he uses tests in his practice, but he has a very simple approach. You were showing on the other live the Return to Simple book.
Yeah.
So he's got a very simple approach. Just eat fatty meat. Don't worry about the numbers. There are a bunch of numbers out there. Sometimes there are some statistics. Some people have gone through the trouble trying to calculate how many more days of life you might expect by using a statin, and the results are 5 to 7 days.
That's crazy. And that's like if you don't miss it, you take it for decades, 5 to 7 days.
Yeah.
Crazy. The whole, it sounds like keep it simple. It's so simple. Just eat fatty meat. But I'll tell you what, out of everything I've done my entire life and all the medication I've been on, just eating fatty meat has healed me more than anything else ever by a long shot. So I'm with Dr. Kiltz on that one. I don't know. I think sometimes we get into the weeds and we overanalyze and we try to outsmart Mother Nature. And it's like, just eat what we're intended to do like every other species does and see what happens. You can find Dr. Nelson at The Real Dr. Nelson, drkiltz.com, Kiltz Mighty Tribe. Shout out Kiltz Mighty Tribe. They could join you over at Kiltz Mighty Tribe if they want to learn more. And do you have anything else you want to mention or shout out? Maybe the coaching program?
Well, Kiltz Mighty Tribe membership is very expensive. You have to go to drkiltz.com. You have to sign up and give up your email address, and you're in. And in case you didn't get it, it's free.
Like my CAC, a big zero.
So, and it's been free ever since he started that. And it will continue to be free membership in the Kiltz Mighty Tribe. We do have a couple of new tiers that we're launching, and we have the Kiltz Health Coaching Certification Program. We're about to finish next week with the first class. We have right now over 70 some students. Not everybody's graduating. It's not an easy thing, but the feedback we've had is very good. You can go to drkiltz.com and sign up as well.
We'll have links in the description for all of that. Thank you so much, Dr. Nelson. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Have a good night.
Have a good night.